Let's see, this is my third video game review, and thus far I've reviewed a Switch 2 re-release, a game that was in early access last year, and now a remake. I promise the next review is going to be none of those. But until then, it is time for a review of the new Bandai Namco remake, Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac. After developer Now Production did such a fantastic job with the first Pac-Man World Re-Pac back in 2022, I was hopeful that the Pac-Man World subseries would stick around for a while and that maybe the next game would get a remake, and sure enough, 3 years later, here we are. Now, while I grew up with the original Pac-Man World on the PS1 before playing Re-Pac back in 2022, I never really had much experience with Pac-Man World 2 in its original form as a kid or an adult. I do own the original PS2 version, but I just kind of never got around to playing it, so I went into this Re-Pac with pretty much entirely fresh eyes. And ultimately, I do think this is a good time, even if it doesn't quite scale the heights that the first Re-Pac did. From a sheer remake perspective, Now Production deserves to be heavily commended for the work they did on this one, because obviously this is a very substantial upgrade from the original game. In this new form, it looks great, it plays well, and given that it largely builds itself on the foundation that the first Re-Pac did, it very much succeeds as a result. And with the addition of some new content and quite a bit of it on top of a pretty big game that was already here, there's plenty of content in this package that'll give you quite a bit of value, especially at just $30. That said, looking at Pac-Man World 2 as a game compared to the first one, I did notice some slightly bigger issues here. For starters, the game has voice acting now, with Martin T. Sherman returning to voice Pac-Man from Pac-Man World 3. And while the voice acting is serviceable, even despite some goofy line delivery here and there, I'm not really a fan of how lippy Pac-Man is during the gameplay. It's more of a nitpick, but I don't need him to tell me how yummy and tasty every single fruit is when he eats one, thank you very much. And as far as the gameplay, I do think the game drags a bit more this time around, because it is much bigger than the first one, and as a result, some levels and honestly most of the boss fights just feel like they drag for me, especially given that some levels start to rely on one-off gimmicks as the game goes on. But there's still plenty of fun to be had here, and while it's not the most incredible platformer I've ever played, and if you're planning to beat the game 100%, I'd recommend 20 Stress Relief Toys' really good meditation skills and protective padding on your controllers for when you inevitably throw them. It's a nice revitalization of a game I'm sure was a childhood classic of many growing up in the 2000s, and I think it's worth looking into whether you grew up with it or never played it at all. Out of 10, I would probably give Pac-Man World 2 Re-Pac a 7 out of 10. It's a fun content-packed game well worth the $30 asking price if you're in the market for a nice platformer revival. Certainly interested to see if Pac-Man World 3 gets the Re-Pac treatment next, given that game's polarizing reception, but until then, give this one a look.